At what point does a statute or an executive order become unconstitutional? Is it some a priori determination? It becomes, I mean, what I'm telling you what I'm getting at, and I don't mean any disrespect. Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court?
I was appointed.
That determined, isn't it a court of final jurisdiction decides what's constitutional or not? In fact, aren't most acts of Congress presumed to be constitutional?
They are presumed, but they're not always constitutional. And no, of course, I was not on the Supreme Court. And I can tell you, Senator, look, we really wrestled over this decision. I personally wrestled over this decision.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Capitol Insights. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating Senate hearing that had everyone talking. You won't believe some of the exchanges between Senator Kennedy and former Deputy AG Sally Yates. Before we get into the juicy details, hit that subscribe button to stay updated on more political breakdowns like this one.
Constitutional or unconstitutional?
I was not convinced that it was constitutional. I believed that it was unconstitutional in the sense that there was no way in the world I could send folks in there to argue something that we didn't believe to be the truth.
So you believe it's unconstitutional?
Yes.
Okay. I don't mean to wax too metaphysical.
And if I can say, I can understand why you might be a little frustrated with the language here.
I'm not frustrated. I'm happy as a clam.
No, and here's the reason. Let me give you a little idea of the timing.
Okay, but
of
let me stop you because I don't have much time. I got a lot of ground to cover.
Okay.
I don't mean to wax too metaphysical here, but at what point does an act of Congress or an executive order become unconstitutional?
Well, it all depends on what the act does.
No, but I mean, at what point is it become? I can look at a statute and say, I think that's unconstitutional. Does that make it unconstitutional?
I think the issue that we faced at the Department of Justice is to defend this executive order would require lawyers to go in and argue that this has nothing to do with religion.
But at what point does a statute or an executive order become unconstitutional? It becomes, I mean, what I'm telling you what I'm getting at, and I don't mean any disrespect. Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court?
I was appointed.
That determined, isn't it a court of final jurisdiction decides what's constitutional or not? In fact, aren't most acts of Congress presumed to be constitutional?
They are presumed, but they're not always constitutional. And no, of course, I was not on the Supreme Court. And I can tell you, Senator, look, we really wrestled over this decision. I personally wrestled over this decision. And it was not one that I took lightly at all. But it was because I took my responsibility seriously as acting Attorney General.
I believe you believe what you're saying.
Yes, I do.
I'm just trying to understand this is likely to come up in the future.
Well,
at what point does an executive order or statute become unconstitutional? When I think it's unconstitutional, or you think it's unconstitutional, or a court of final jurisdiction says it's unconstitutional?
I believe that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General. If the President asks him or her to do something that he or she believes is unlawful or unconstitutional, to say no. And that's what I did.
Okay. Do you believe that the Russians did, in fact, influence the outcome of the election, Director?
In our intelligence community assessment, we made the point that we could not make that call. The intelligence community has neither the authority, the expertise, or the resources to make that judgment. The only thing we said was we saw no evidence of influencing voter tallies in any of the 50 states. But we were not in a position to judge what actual outcome on the election.
How about you, Ms. Yates?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that's part of the problem is we'll never know.
Okay. Have you ever heard
Mind-blowing, right? The finale was intense. Kennedy grilled both officials about leaking information to the press. Both Yates and Clapper acknowledged doing background briefings with media, but firmly denied leaking any classified information. The way they handled these accusations was fascinating to watch. So there you have it, folks. A hearing that touched on constitutional authority, presidential powers, Russian interference, and media relations, all in one session. If you enjoyed this breakdown of high-stakes political drama, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button on Capitol Insights and notification bell. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.